inductee, Bruce Buffer, American professional mixed martial artist.
To begin the main event of the evening. This fight is 5 rounds for the undisputed title of UFC Light Heavyweight Champion of the World. The pride of Ireland and the #3 ranked featherweight fighter in the world, the notorious Conor McGregor! Ladies and gentlemen, this is the main event of the evening.
Bruce is so good in the octagon, we had to have the sound for you guys. Again, he's an American professional mixed martial arts ring announcer and the official octagon announcer for the UFC, Ultimate Fighting Championship. He's introduced these events all over the world, and he is also known as the veteran voice of the octagon. His catchphrase is, "It's time," when he announces before the main event of the UFC card. Bruce holds a second-degree black belt in Tang Soo Do, so he not only watches it, he knows how to fight as well, and he's also trained as a kickboxer. He began working in the UFC announcing in 1997 and is considered one of the most popular and recognizable figures in the sport. Bruce uses the catchphrases in his announcing and also has a signature move known as the Buffer 180, which he motions directly across the octagon before quickly spinning 180 degrees and pointing to the corner being introduced. Buffer also performs 45-degree and 90-degree turns before most Buffer 180s, but reserves the Buffer 180 for the main events and co-main events. He also happens to be a half-brother of boxing and professional ring announcer Michael Buffer, who was a past inductee, and they are the first 2 brothers to ever be inducted into the International Sports Hall of Fame. Let's give it up for Bruce Buffer.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. I appreciate your being here at this time. I want to thank Fairfax Hackney and Dr. Robert Goldman and all at the International Sports Hall of Fame for this prestigious honor and to share this day with all these fine inductees, which is an honor for me as an individual. My path here was a long path that was unexpected. I'd owned my first business when I was 19, and I owned a variety of businesses. I'm basically an entrepreneur my entire life. And my life drastically took a very dramatic change in the late 1990s when boxing was the water cooler conversation on a Monday the way UFC is today. I was watching every Tuesday night fight, Saturday night, Sunday Wide World of Sports. And my dad, who was a huge boxing fan, was teaching me boxing basically at 4 years old on, teaching me fighting techniques. He was a close combat, hand-to-hand combat instructor in the Marines, served in World War II in Korea. I grew up with a drill instructor. I used to walk in the room and say, "Hi, Dad," and he'd say, "Son, project your voice, chest out, shoulders back, let them know you're in the room." So I always stood up with that kind of an attitude all my life. And when I was watching boxing with him and my brother Brian and my beautiful mama one day, we were watching, and out came this debonair, handsome-looking man, dressed to the nines in a tuxedo, had a very James Bond image, came up with that phrase, "Let's get ready to rumble," and I became a fan of this gentleman. But at the same time, my curiosity was piqued because at the time that he came out, they would chyron on the screen, Michael Buffer. Now, I own telemarketing companies in my 20s, and I've seen every phone book in the United States. We didn't have the internet back then. And like most of us would do, I looked up my name in the phone book, and I never saw the name Buffer in any phone book in the United States. So my curiosity was piqued. I'm wondering, who is this guy? I thought we kind of looked alike, although he's very, very handsome, very much better looking than me, if you want to call it that. And I thought, could there be some connection here? So I would call up Don King's offices, Bob Arum's offices. I was trying to find out more information about this gentleman. And I found out that he grew up in an area close to where I grew up in Philadelphia. And then my interest became even more piqued. And I started making more phone calls, and eventually people were stopping me on the street saying, hey, are you Michael Buffer's brother, the man that says, let's get ready to rumble? And I said, no, my brother's Brian. I have no idea who that is. And this kept going on until finally, my dad and I were driving up north one day, I'll never forget it. And I said, Dad, this is happening. We watch this man on TV. Do you have any idea who this guy is? And I got this. I think that's your brother. I go, what? I'm 28 years old, and I'm like, I think that's, what are you talking about, Dad? He said, son, I never told you. When I was 20 years old, I went in to serve my time during World War II. I went overseas for 9 months. I was married before. When I came back, a son had been born, a divorce ensued. The last time I saw him was when he was 2.5 years old. It's just one of these stories with all respect to the situation. And it turned out that when Michael was doing an event in LA, one night I had my father call the venue and leave a message for him. And Michael called him back, and they got together for lunch. Now at this time, Michael was 43 years old. It turned out to be his son, Michael Buffer. And very interesting to the story is that when my dad, his mother, back when he was 2.5, he had put him up with another family to be raised. And as Michael would say, he had a leave it to Beaver lifestyle, and he grew up under the name of Michael Huber. So when he went in the Army at 20 during the Vietnam War, they looked on his birth certificate, which was never formally changed. He was never formally adopted. And they said, you're not Michael Huber, you're Michael Buffer, right? Had that not happened, I wouldn't be standing here today. I owe this because of meeting my brother, because 4 years later, running the companies that I ran, I had 2 companies. I was living an amazing lifestyle, beach house, sort of like a 2.5 men lifestyle, minus the alcoholism. And I really enjoyed what I did. I was doing quite well, but I was very burned out on my businesses. And one time I went to Vegas to see him, as I used to go and meet up with him, and we go to fights together. And I watched the reaction of Jack Nicholson, Hulk Hogan, all the people in the audience when he said, let's get ready to rumble, and I had an epiphany. And I went back to my room that night instead of going out and partying or playing blackjack or whatever we love to do in Vegas. And I incessantly started writing 3 pages of notes. I couldn't stop. My hand just kept going. Trademark this phrase. Put them in the basketball cards, football fields, movies, TVs, toys, let's get ready to rumble, video games, all this. And I kept writing and writing and writing, and I met up with him and I said, later on, a couple weeks later, I said, Michael, you know, I think you need to do something very strong. We need to trademark this phrase properly. I want to make you richer and more famous than you ever dreamed. I want to sell both my companies. I'll quit with the money I have in the bank. I'll become your manager, your business partner, and we'll go for it. And he was very intrigued by the idea, and he said, that sounds incredible, but how are you going to do all this? I said, I really have no idea. I said, but if I'm going to give up this to do this, better believe I'll make it happen. And that was basically over 30 years ago. And during this time period, I would put him in every big event that happened, whether it was WCW wrestling at the time, every event taking place, imploding hotels in Vegas, football games, basketball games, you name it. But along came an event in 1993 called the UFC. And when the UFC came along, it was a very big spectacle back then. It wasn't a mainstream sport. And it was a amazing change, all type of fighting. And I knew in my heart this could be the biggest thing in the world if it was refined and managed correctly. So in 1996, I called them up and I had Michael do 3 of the events, UFC 6, 7, and Ultimate. But during our first time when we were in Casper, Wyoming, when he announced his first event, the owner, Robert Meyer, said to him, listen, when you get in the octagon, we want you to say, if it's not in the octagon, it's not real. Well, at that time, wrestling, with all respect to wrestling, because I have huge respect for wrestlers, but it's sports entertainment. They do get hurt. I have tremendous respect for these athletes. But at the time, back then, they wanted you to think more on the realistic side of what was going on. And I got a call on Monday from the WCW, and they said, what are you having him do this thing for? He goes, he's with us. I said, well, his contract allows him to do whatever. I have 3 events. He'll complete the 3 events. He couldn't continue anyway at the pace that the UFC went. And the WCW he loved so much, and they were obviously paying astronomical amounts of money, it was an obvious answer to stay with WCW. So at that time, then I went to the UFC, and I said, okay, you need a buffer in the octagon. I have the media contacts. I believe this is going to be the biggest thing happening in sports. I want to be your octagon announcer and grow with you, but I will do everything I can that I have the ability to do in the media and my contacts and everything else to help you get this sport bigger and better. I'll help you brand it, because that's what I love to do. I recognize brands when they're going to be strong, and I thought the UFC was going to be the biggest thing ever. It kind of fell on deaf ears. About 6 months later, I had a fighter that I managed in Dubai, Puerto Rico in 1996 named Scott the Pitbull Ferrazzo. I did not want to be a fight manager. I put him in the event so I could go down there and convince him to let me announce the prelims, which they did. I announced 3 preliminary fights. I look at it now and I'm kind of like this when I watch it. But at the same time, I asked them, I said, I want to be your announcer. Well, they didn't hire me. Another 6 months went by. They asked me to announce UFC 10 because the announcer they had couldn't announce it. I went in and announced the entire event. I said, let me have the job. They didn't hire me, they hired somebody else. Another 6 or more months go by, and they called me up and they said, listen, do you want to co-star on the TV show Friends, which was the biggest thing happening at the time, and it was in its 2nd series? I said, of course, I'd love to. So they said, well, Warner Brothers is going to send somebody down for audio and videotape, and they'll let you know if you have the job. They came down, they picked it up, they called me that night, they said, be on the set tomorrow morning at 6 in the morning, rehearse all day, film on Wednesday, you're going to co-star as yourself on Friends. All right, now I thought, here, this is my shot. I met with the owner on the set for lunch, and I said, listen, Robert, I feel like someone waiting to be asked to go to the prom, and nobody's asking me to go to the prom. I'm going to ask you one more time. I need to become the octagon announcer. I will help you build the sport, build this brand. I'll do everything I can, but I want to grow with you as the announcer. I'm a big poker player. That was the best poker hand I ever played in my life. He said yes, and from that point on, I announced every event in the UFC until there became too many, and now I have an excellent backup announcer that does 6 or 7 shows a year while I announce all the other ones. And it has grown. It's grown from spectacle to mainstream sport. I've been on this UFC rocket ship now for, it'll be 29 years come February. And it's an amazing first-class seat that I love to have. And I want to thank everybody at the UFC, especially Dana White. When Dana White took over the UFC in 1999 with the Fertitta brothers, we were about to go out of business. I knew we would make it. And with his tenacity, his amazing guidance, and everything he does today, we are where we are, and it's just an amazing experience. And out of this, I've been able to appear for many other sports. I've opened up for the Raiders, basketball, hockey, baseball, beer pong, you name it. I've done so many different things, and I travel the world doing all these events. Tonight I'm going to make a very special appearance for the Olympia. I'll be at the F1 in a couple of weeks. And I love what I do, and I have so many people to thank for everything I do. But most of all, I want to thank my family and my loved ones, because without the support factor of my family and my loved ones, I would not be where I am today. I have an amazing business partner and close friend named Kristen. Without her and everything we do in my business when I travel the world, without her running everything back at the home ship, we're just an amazing team that runs this entire business together, as I still also manage the career of my brother, Michael Buffer. But I'm also very lucky to have amazing parents. I've lost both my parents. I lost my beautiful mama last year right before Christmas. I would call her before and after every UFC, and I still do in my heart because I know she's my guardian angel looking down on me. And my brother Brian, without their support, and Brian, whom I grew up with my entire life, they're my biggest fans, and their love and support and motivation have been a driving force for me my entire career. So I just want to make sure, if I've missed anybody, there are so many people to thank. I'm blessed to do what I do. Every night I walk out in the octagon, I consider it my first day. I walk out to prove to myself, to prove to you, to prove to the fighters, to prove to the fans, Dana White, the powers that be, that I deserve this job. I wake up every morning with UFC on my chest, feeling very proud of the whole thing, and I plan on going on for many, many years to come. And it's very important to me. So with that being said, there's only one thing left to say. This is the moment we've all been waiting for. It's time! Made it, Mom! Top of the world! Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Hey, what can I say? I'm an announcer. I always have to have a card around, right?
Bruce Beffer, congratulations,
Thank you.
2024 class of the International
you.
Sports Hall of Fame. How did you enjoy the ceremony?
No, it's amazing. It's an honor to be with all the other fine inductees. The great work that you and Fairfax put into it, it's been ongoing and been talked about for years. It finally happened. So, like I always say, this is the moment I've always been waiting for, and it's truly an honor, and I thank you very much.
Well, we were so excited to have you, and now you're the first two brothers
Yeah.
who ever were inducted in the history of the International Sports Hall
It's
of
awesome.
Fame.
It's awesome.
And you being a martial artist, I mean, when you are in the octagon,
Yep.
you're a real deal. I mean, you know what it's like to get hit and how to hit.
Yeah, I have a fighter's mentality. I get into my fighter's mind before I go out and announce these warriors, so I can give them everything I've got.
Well, it certainly shows, and you're an inspiration. People get more excited. I think sometimes they're more excited to watch you than they are to watch the fighters.
Well, it's not about me, it's about the fighters, but thank you for saying that.
Bruce Buffer, class of 2024, International Sports Hall of Fame.
Big cheers, everybody. Thank you so much.